Joining us now is Libertarian candidate for president, Austin Petersen. How are you, sir?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on. Austin, I'm particularly frustrated with what's going on, not just in America. I've been frustrated for a while about that, but with the election. And I'm particularly frustrated with the Libertarian Party because this is the time for a Libertarian candidate, the party, a third party to make its mark. The other two candidates are the Republican Democrat candidate are such disasters like never before. Why in the heck does the Libertarian Party have Gary Johnson as its nominee when Gary clearly is not a Libertarian?
I think the reason that they chose him was because they wanted somebody with that real executive experience. Of course, I challenged Governor Johnson and came in second to him at the end of the primary. And I think that the argument that they made was simply that the voters weren't going to take someone like myself seriously. Because while I had the more pure libertarian message, the idea was that if Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were such disastrous nominees, that if they played the role of moderates, that perhaps they would pick up a lot of these independent voters. And a lot of those polls, some of these polls, they are actually showing that it's working but it's not necessarily because of Gary Johnson so much as it is people's absolute detest of Donald Trump in states like Utah and Alaska and other states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I thought about this over the weekend. Think about this. If Hillary Clinton is such a disaster, why isn't Donald Trump doing better in the polls? Shouldn't he be running away with it? And if Donald Trump is such a disaster, how come Hillary Clinton isn't running away with it? It's because they're both disasters.
Yeah, I saw this morning that the dead gorilla Harambe was placed in a poll, and I guess he's polling at 5% against Trump and Hillary. So if a dead gorilla can post up 5%, I guess they are just as bad as we thought. Wow. If I had to make a guess, Doc, and I always try and be objective, I think Hillary's probably gonna run away with it, and the reason why is because she solidified her base. Bernie Sanders sold out and handed her the revolution that was against the 1%. He handed it to the 1%, and then Donald Trump alienated pretty much everybody he could. I mean, the only people he could really get to speak to him at his convention was like Scott Baio, I think, and Mike Tyson, not considered, not luminaries of conservative thought. So to me, it seems the ground game will probably favor Hillary, but it does look as if the Republicans are going to maintain their hold on the Senate. Historically, if you're a cynic like me, like libertarians tend to be, historically the growth of government has been at its least with a Democratic president and a Republican Congress. So at a minimum, we might be able to try and hold off the tides of statism for another 4 years until we can hopefully have a better outlook.
I was at both the RNC and DNC, and we covered a lot of the outside game, the protesters, the people, the streets, so to speak. And right. I realized that both the Republicans and Democrats have a problem. People thought it was just the Republicans, but it's the Democrats as well, and that's the divide. People want change. The Ted Cruz or people, supporters of the people who may lean libertarian, they're done with the system and the game. And some of the people who voted or support Trump are done with the game, too. Democrats have the same problem with the Bernie supporters, and now the collusion between the DNC and Hillary Clinton with the emails that were released, you see more and more people that are likely either going to stay home or vote third party. Do you think it's possible that neither Hillary nor Donald gets to 270 electoral votes?
It is possible if Gary's strategy pays off, because right now they're focusing on some western states, New Mexico, Utah, and Alaska, where Donald Trump only won by slight majorities. So what they're hoping to do is to try and tip the election into the Electoral College so that Paul Ryan essentially decides who the next president of the United States would be, which Paul Ryan has not been the biggest defender of Donald Trump. We saw him coming out today actually attacking Donald Trump's attacks on Muslims and Muslim immigration. So I think there's probably an opportunity, provided the American people do something unprecedented. However, most of the time what happens is that they'll third-party candidates will poll high, but then they don't actually pull that in the ballot box. It depends on just how terrified people are when they go into the election booth this fall. I think that it's time for a change. I'm definitely going to vote for the Libertarian candidate. No, he's not perfect, but I just can't sleep at night voting. The idea that I could vote for Trump or Hillary. You know what the real problem is, Doc? Is we are so easily polarized and so easily terrified. The politicians have created enough boogeymen for enough time that the American people are subdued. And we are also doped up on so many dummy drugs that the revolution isn't going to happen until we the people can finally express solidarity. And we are so easily cowed because we're put together in our special interest groups, whether it comes to race or whether it comes to our sexuality now. And it's so easy to control a population that is so easily frightened. The people don't know their true power. If we were to just walk away from some of these politicians, they wouldn't have the power that they have. But a new form of solidarity has to come about that's not based on the old lines that we've drawn up or the politicians have gerrymandered us into.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're speaking with a Libertarian candidate for president, Austin Petersen. Austin, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to, and I hate to use this word because it sounds like one of the politically correct, nicey, leftist terms of unity. We need to unite, but that's the truth. The way it has to come about, though, is the 90% or whatever it is of good people that can honestly agree and find common ground on whatever it is, 90-some percent, which I really agree. We have to figure that out, but it's not going to happen because we all just, through osmosis, join up. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to have to lead. Somebody's going to have to cut through with the right message. A leader that says, guys, this is all crazy. You've been sold a bill of goods, and if you want something different, here's what it is. Who's that person? Are they out there?
Well, I
don't see them.
Joe, you, Glenn, Stu, people at the Blaze, Dana, you guys are my heroes on this because the media, for the most part, is a weapon of mass distraction. And it has to entertain in order to get the ratings, right? You've got to satisfy your advertisers. That has to. You can't have the business model. But you've also got to educate people on these principles that you and I share, these principles of limited government, constitutionalism, sound money, free markets, free trade, and personal liberty, Second Amendment. How are we going to do this? Well, the problem is, Doc, is that conservatives have so dominated on the right, the discussion, and let's be honest, conservatives tend to not be that sexy. Newt Gingrich isn't really that sexy of a guy. Have a little bit more appeal. Maybe it's time for us to step up and start lionizing our leaders. I'd like to make some biographical documentaries about people like Glenn, people like Friedrich Hayek, people like Murray Rothbard, because the people don't know our story. The history of the conservative and the libertarian movement is certainly not being told in our public schools. So if we're not educating and inspiring and activating young people and getting them excited about the ideas of free markets, which I honestly think that free markets are sexy as hell because of the type of prosperity and wealth and luxury that it gives not only to the rich in this country, but to the poor and middle class and social mobility.
If it's explained, though. If it's explained, if you can lay it out. But it can be sexy.
If it's offered. Absolutely. Who doesn't love the idea, the American dream, that you can come here with nothing and make yourself into a multi-millionaire? Donald Trump should know. He started with a small loan of $1 million.
Right.
But those kinds of connections here in the United States. You can be a poor farm boy from peculiar income in second in the presidential nomination here in the United States. You can't do that in countries like India. You certainly can't do that in North Korea. They're going to resort to cannibalism here soon in Venezuela. Socialism fails, and we see it on every front. But in terms of freedom in the United States, I think that conservatives and libertarians, we really do need a coalition. We need a new coalition. The Ted Cruzers, the true conservatives with the true libertarians, and certainly from that more of that tradition, the left-right, the Glenn Beck plus Penn Jillette style of coalition has got to reform, because the old days of fusionism and Bill Buckley, the social conservatives plus the defense conservatives plus the fiscal conservatives, coalitions are gone. The Ronald Reagan coalitions are gone, and we need a new form of fusionism with the realities, the political realities that we have now, which is, unfortunately, we've got the sold out, I would call them Trump conservatives, but they're not really conservatives. They're really just populists.
Right.
But the conservatives, they're going to on for a little while they go and play with Donald Trump and pretend like they've got a movement going on. And then once they're done and their stain has been removed from the right, it will be left to us to pick up the pieces, the Ted Cruzers, the Rand Paulers. We've got to build something new in the future, because if we don't, there's nobody else. It's us or it's over.
Austin, I think you're right. It's got to be based on priorities, number one, and a libertarian platform. I've thought about this for a long time. There are, what I believe, more libertarians in America by far, because most people really do want, on some level, to be left alone. We've now reached a point where, when it comes to pot and some things like that, where people are like, listen, you're not causing me trouble, I don't care. We've gotten away from reefer madness, and that whole agenda from 100 years ago. And then what we do is we prioritize, recognizing that most people do want to be left alone, have a basic libertarian attitude. We then prioritize with all these people, and we say, okay, we have some differences on a few of these issues here, and some of them are passionate issues that you've fought for years that are pretty big, whether it's, abortion or whatever it is. I'm just throwing that one out there. Let's prioritize. Yes, I recognize that is a priority to you, but we need some things that prioritizes all of us in our future, because without it, you're not going to have a country or a life to worry about arguing about abortion or whatever it is. And we admit our biases and then say, here is the platform, our priority platform. Number one, who can't agree that we need a balanced budget and likely a balanced budget amendment? Number two, true tax simplification and reform, flat tax, fair tax, whatever. And we go down the list of 5 or 10 things like that are really simple. We got to get rid of the business tax in America and bring us in line with, the rest of the world. Austin, we lay out these priorities that everybody can understand, and we make it sexy, like you said, to even younger generations. And you say, wouldn't you like to have the dream that people had in the 1950s, and look how it boomed? You can have that again. That's, Austin, I think.
Yeah, yeah, how your parents actually were able to afford to buy a house and have 2 cars. You weren't in debt, and there wasn't the college debt that we had. But there are a lot of people who have a vested interest in ensuring that does not happen, because if something like that were to happen, there would be, we would have another Tea Party movement in this country. But remember, we are so easily cowed and controlled. The Tea Party's, our alignment was pushed off the mark, because the Tea Party originally started as a response to the bailouts and stimulus that occurred under George W. Bush. Yeah, TARP and President Obama's bailout programs. He continued the stimulus, and that was the main theme of the Tea Party. It was a response to Obamacare as well. But then, unfortunately, what happened in 2-3 years, and I went to all those Tea Party rallies, man, I was there. And I saw what happened is that it started to turn away from a fiscally conservative movement to a socially conservative movement. And when you start getting into the social issues, Doc, you start to lose the libertarians, because the conservatives have much more clout, and so they start to bring out the hammer, and every problem's a nail, and every libertarian looks like a nail. So we get driven out, because while we're there sort of trying to talk about spontaneous order and free markets, the sort of, I guess I wouldn't call them social conservatives as much as like the populists who really have taken over now, are starting to talk about things like immigration and foreign policy, which are a lot less clear. Those issues are a lot muddier than issues like fiscal reform, tax reform, and things like that, which libertarians and conservatives can agree on. So again, there are vested interests who want to ensure that people like Ted Cruz and me don't ever sit down and start making plans for the future, because if we did, what a terrifying prospect that would be for the statists and the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrat. Because if people start doing what you and I are talking about here, Doc Thompson, that's real danger. That is real danger. And
absolutely.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, but there are people who do, George Soros, who want to try to stop people like ourselves. Oh yeah, they know exactly what it is that we're up to, and they know how to control us, because they know what issues we're weak on. They know that conservatives, if pot becomes an issue, like let's say, there's a discussion between a conservative and a libertarian. The liberal news host is going to throw out the discussion and make it about pot, and then all the social conservatives are going to get turned off, and then they're going to throw out the issue of gay marriage, and then all the libertarians are going to be turned off by the social conservatives. Like you said, priorities. We've got to find these priorities. We've got to nail them down. We've got to stay focused on them so that we are not distracted or controlled.
And the way it has to be explained, Austin, is, guys, yes, I know you're passionate about all these other things, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's irrelevant, because you're not going to exist anymore if we don't get a handle on spending and reform this other stuff in the economy. Either we're going to be so economically weak that we become militarily weak, or we're going to be economically weak where we can't feed ourselves, or the entire country becomes insolvent and collapses, and we end up like Venezuela or something. So, yeah, we'll get to all that stuff down the road. We can do that. Let's prioritize because we're not going to exist if we don't. I mean, I think that's the message forward.
The currency now, our currency says, "In God we trust." And, obviously I consider myself more secular, so it doesn't quite represent me as much. But one of the things that the first currency of the United States most people did not know is that it said, "Mind your business."
Yep.
Now, mind your business, that can mean a lot of different things. But when it says mind your business, to me, that's the sort of Jefferson test, the Thomas Jefferson test here. If a policy or if somebody's behavior neither picks your pocket nor breaks your leg, what role does the government really need to play in it exactly? What role does the government need to play when it comes to issues like religion or personal relationships or anything like that? Mind your business. I wish that the United States currency could return to mind your business, and we could get back to a mind your business nation instead of everybody's nose has got to be in everybody else's business and everybody's hand is in everybody else's pocketbook. So we are sort of chained to one another in a collectivist society rather than a highly individualistic one. I mean, individualism is terrifying. When you observe the herd, you do the opposite. And so it requires a courage, and we are also terrified all the time. Turn on your TV. You're hearing the fear all the time. They're coming across, they're rapists. They're like, all the rich people, the 1%. Yeah.
I think what we have to do is let's continue this because I got to escape, but let's continue this discussion. Let's work together on a couple things in the future, okay?
I'm here. Let's do it.
Okay, man. Austin Petersen, thanks so much. Got some good ideas. We'll get some of your calls coming up. We get a break in. This is the Morning Blaze.